Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, a titan of history, whose very image is etched into our collective memory. We see a ruler draped in impossible luxury, her gowns heavy with jewels and intricate embroidery, a face as pale and perfect as porcelain. This is Queen Elizabeth I as we know her from history books. But here's the shocking truth that would make your skin crawl. This legendary monarch bathed only once a month, and she was considered extremely clean by the standards of her time. This wasn't just a personal quirk. This was the reality of an entire age, a time when the people of Europe, from the peasant in his hovel to the king in his castle, developed a sudden, paralyzing fear of water. Today, we pull back the silken curtain of history to reveal the unvarnished and often pungent truth. We will explore why a continent turned its back on bathing, how a queen maintained an illusion of purity, and how the simple act of washing became a matter of life, death, and even religious dogma. When we speak of Elizabeth, it's easy to be blinded by the grandeur. But behind that mask of power lay a woman who, by her own admission, bathed perhaps once a month, whether it was necessary or not. To us, it's a shocking revelation. But in the 16th century, this wasn't just unremarkable. It was seen as a sign of prudence, a sensible approach to staying alive. The people of the Renaissance lived under a perpetual shadow of death. The Black Plague had carved its way through Europe, leaving a deep, psychological scar. And in the minds of the era's leading physicians, the enemy was not filth, but the very thing we associate with cleanliness: water. They believed in a theory of miasmas, deadly fogs and corrupt airs that carried disease. According to the medical consensus of the time, water, especially hot water, was a traitor. It opened the body's pores, creating gateways for these invisible killers to swarm in, spreading sickness and death. Bathing was seen as a dangerous indulgence that weakened the body, leaving it defenseless against infection. The French physician Théophraste Renaudot wrote in 1655 that bathing, unless for a strict medical reason, was not only unnecessary but also harmful. He claimed it filled the head with vapors and weakened the nerves. The great English philosopher Francis Bacon was so concerned that he devised a complex 24-hour bathing ritual designed to minimize the skin's absorption of harmful watery elements. First, the body was slathered in oil. After 2 hours in the water, the bather was wrapped tightly in waxed cloth soaked in resin and myrrh, a process meant to seal the pores. Only after a full day was the wrapping removed, and the skin rubbed down with more oil and salt. This wasn't hygiene, it was a paranoid, pseudo-scientific ritual. This fear was compounded by the disappearance of the public bathhouses that had been hubs of social life in the Middle Ages. As plague epidemics rolled across the continent, these communal spaces were shuttered, seen as breeding grounds for disease. And with their closure, the very habit of full-body washing began to fade from memory. So, if not water, what? The answer, for the nobility, lay in linen. It was widely believed that a clean, pristine white linen shirt was the ultimate sign of cleanliness. The fabric was thought to act like a sponge, absorbing sweat, oils, and dirt directly from the skin, effectively cleaning the body by drawing the filth away. Changing your linen undergarments frequently was the true mark of a refined individual. And Queen Elizabeth, with her vast and immaculate wardrobe, was a master of this practice. Still, unlike many of her subjects, the Queen did bathe. But when she did, it was an event, an elaborate ceremony. A massive copper bathtub would be hauled into her private chambers. Cauldrons of water were heated and poured in, the steam infused with fragrant herbs and expensive aromatic oils. This wasn't just about getting clean, it was a protective ritual, the scents believed to ward off disease. For daily maintenance, her routine was a world away from a simple splash of water. Her ladies-in-waiting would use damp linen cloths, soaked in rosewater or vinegar, to gently wipe down her skin. To combat unpleasant odors, she wore perfumed gloves and used dry powders to absorb the oil from her famous white face. Her dental hygiene was equally unique. We know that for New Year's, her court laundress gifted her 4 cloths for the teeth, coarse fabric squares stitched with silk and trimmed with lace, used for scrubbing and polishing. She also possessed gold toothpicks and a ruby, encrusted ear scraper, tools of a royal who paid attention to detail, even if her methods seem strange to us. By the standards of the 16th century, Elizabeth was a remarkably clean woman. Her successor, James I, was rumoured to only ever wash his fingers. France's King Henry IV was so famously foul-smelling that his stench was a subject of court gossip, a trait his son, Louis XIII, not only inherited but boasted about, declaring, "I inherited this from my father. My body smells of sweat." Elizabeth, with her frequent changes of linen and meticulous use of perfumes and powders, was considered a paragon of cleanliness. While Christian Europe was recoiling from water, travelers venturing east were discovering a world where hygiene was an art form, a daily ritual deeply woven into the fabric of society. The contrast was staggering. The Swabian physician Leonhard Rauwolf, visiting Tripoli in the 1570s, wrote with awe about his experience in a public bathhouse. It was a multi-stage odyssey of cleansing. First, he was led into a steam room to sweat profusely. Then, he was bathed and subjected to a vigorous massage, so intense the masseur stood on his shoulder blades. A paste of arsenic and quicklime was applied to his skin to remove body hair, before he was scrubbed head to toe with soap foam and a coarse woolen cloth. The ritual concluded with a special clay paste to cleanse and stimulate the hair. It was a world away from the vinegar-soaked rags of the English court. English traveller Henry Blount, journeying through the Ottoman Empire in the 17th century, was equally astonished. He noted that the very first thing the Turks did after conquering a city was build magnificent public bathhouses. These were state-funded, ensuring that everyone, rich or poor, could bathe for a tiny fee. To not bathe 2 or 3 times a week was to be considered utterly filthy. This stark difference was rooted in religion. For Muslims, cleanliness was, and is, essential for prayer. But in Spain, this very practice became a mark of suspicion. After the Reconquista, when Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella drove the Moors out of Spain, they set about erasing their cultural legacy. Queen Isabella, who is often apocryphally quoted as boasting she bathed only twice in her life, ordered the destruction of the beautiful Arab baths. By 1567, her successor Philip II had banned them entirely. Frequent bathing began to be seen as a sign of heresy. The Spanish Inquisition actively investigated those who washed too often, associating the habit with secret Muslims or Jews who had been forced to convert but might be practicing their old traditions in secret. Cleanliness had become dangerously political. This fear reached its symbolic peak in the legend of Isabella Clara Eugenia, Philip II's daughter. Besieging the city of Ostend in 1601, she allegedly vowed not to change her linen undergarments until the city fell. The siege lasted over 3 years. By the end, her once white garments had supposedly turned a dingy, yellowish-brown. The tide against bathing only began to turn, ever so slowly, in the 18th century. But not in the way you might think. At the glittering, grandiose court of Louis XIV, the Sunday king, bathing was still deeply unpopular. The king himself reportedly washed fully only twice in his life, and then only on the advice of his doctors. Instead, his court perfected the art of perfumed hygiene. Odors were not washed away but masked under layers of powdered wigs, scented gloves, and fragrant pomades. Versailles, for all its splendor, was an epicenter of stench and perfume. It would take the scientific advancements of the 19th century, the rise of germ theory, public sanitation, and indoor plumbing for Western Europe to finally embrace water again. The fear of miasmas was replaced by an understanding of microbes, and bathing transformed from a dangerous risk into an essential pillar of health. The story of Queen Elizabeth and her monthly bath is more than just a quirky historical fact. But it also tells a deeper story, a story of how, for centuries, the illusion of cleanliness was more important than the reality, and how the most powerful rulers on earth lived in a way that reminds us how fragile and how recent our modern standards truly are. History is filled with these hidden truths, stories that challenge everything we thought we knew about the past. If you were captivated by this glimpse behind the royal curtain, please give this video a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history.